Breaking news out of Chicago. What was supposed to be a fresh start for the Bears under new leadership has already turned into a nightmare. Fans are furious, the scoreboard was brutal, and the questions surrounding this team's future are only getting louder. Stay locked in, because what just unfolded on that field might be the biggest warning sign of the entire season. But before we dive into the full story, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the latest NFL updates. Alright, let's get into it. The Chicago Bears just delivered one of the most embarrassing performances I've seen in years. They started this game showing flashes of promise, but it all collapsed in an instant, and from that point on, there was no fight, no response, and no leadership. The final score? A crushing 52-21 loss to the Detroit Lions. And remember, this isn't week 4 or 5, we're talking about just the second game of the season. 2 games in, and the Bears have already surrendered a staggering 79 points. Head coach Ben Johnson, who was supposed to bring discipline, energy, and a new identity, looked completely lost. His game plan evaporated, his players weren't bought in, and the coaching staff as a whole seemed confused about what they were even trying to accomplish. It felt like the team was asking themselves, "What are we doing out here?" And let's be honest, the penalties were nothing short of a disaster. False starts, holding calls, mistakes from the offensive line, even the center committing sloppy errors. Add that to a defense that looked unprepared and undisciplined, and you get the disaster we just witnessed. Ben Johnson was brought in to fix the culture immediately. Instead, what we saw was sloppier, uglier, and more disorganized than their Monday night collapse against Minnesota. And that raises the biggest question: is this team already falling apart just 2 weeks in? It wasn't only the Bears who fell apart on Sunday, the officials added fuel to the disaster. That controversial one-handed catch by Detroit right before halftime? Every angle showed the receiver stepped out of bounds. Even the broadcast crew was saying it. That play should never have counted, and instead of going into the break tied at 21-21, the Bears walked into the locker room stunned, flat, and trailing. That single moment drained the life out of the entire team. And the truth is, the first half wasn't all bad. Statistically, Chicago was keeping pace with Detroit. The yardage was nearly identical, both teams were trading punts, and the game felt like it could swing either way. But the difference came down to execution, and the Bears failed in every key moment. The offensive game plan was another mess. We heard all week this would be a balanced attack, yet the running game never materialized. DeAndre Swift carried the load, but there was no rotation in the backfield. Rashawn Johnson, active and available, didn't even see the field. Meanwhile, Caleb Williams was forced to air it out, targeting Rounce Roden heavily in the first half, 5 catches, 82 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was hot early, but completely neutralized after halftime, finishing with over 100 yards yet plagued by 3 costly drops once Detroit's defense locked in on him. Then there's the tight ends, supposedly the backbone of Ben Johnson's offense. Yet Colston Love didn't see a single target from Caleb. Cole Kmet barely touched the football. And Luther Burden, a player hyped as a difference maker, was invisible. For a scheme that's supposed to run through multiple weapons, this looked like a one-man show that collapsed under pressure. Now let's put numbers to it. Chicago gave up 511 total yards to the Lions. Jared Goff shredded them for 5 touchdowns, while Detroit racked up 25 first downs and dominated time of possession. The Bears' defense forced just 3 punts, registered 0 sacks, and allowed the Lions to convert every critical down, including 1 brutal 4th down conversion. On the other side, Chicago's offense managed 340 total yards, moved the chains 19 times, went 7-for-13 on 3rd down, but failed both of their 4th down tries. And those failures? They fall directly on Ben Johnson's shoulders, a coach who promised discipline and efficiency, but instead delivered chaos. 4 sacks allowed. 7 penalties. Nearly 300 yards of offense wasted with no direction. And at the end of the day, the Bears are sitting at the very bottom of the NFC North, the only winless team in the division. Where was the energy we were promised in training camp? Where was the creativity, the discipline, the identity this coaching staff swore they were building? From the opening whistle, the offense looked lost. No rhythm. No spark. Just a team going through the motions while Detroit ripped them apart. Yes, Chicago managed 340 total yards, 205 through the air, 135 on the ground, but those numbers mean nothing when drives stall, protection collapses, and momentum never exists. Possession barely touched 29 minutes, and in truth, it felt even shorter. The offensive line was a disaster. Braxton Jones struggled all afternoon, repeatedly exposed on the edge. Aiden Hutchinson made him look like a rookie, bullying his way into the backfield snap after snap. With AZ Trapillo and Chronomagi inactive, the depth just wasn't there. That forced veterans like Joe Thuney into impossible situations, trying to cover two defenders at once. The result? Caleb Williams running for his life and going down 4 times. And then came the back-breaking interception. Instead of throwing the ball away, Caleb forced a pass toward Olamide Zaccoz that sailed high and straight into Detroit's secondary. One bad decision, one unnecessary gamble, and it killed any chance of a comeback. But here's the most baffling part: the Bears actually found some success on the ground, then completely abandoned it. The run game showed flashes of life, but instead of building on it, Ben Johnson once again drifted back into a reckless, one-dimensional attack. For a coach in his second year, supposedly brought in to clean up mistakes and maximize his quarterback, this performance was a step backward in every possible way. Early on, the Bears actually found something that worked: the run game. For a brief moment, it looked like they had an answer against Detroit's defense. But instead of leaning into it, Ben Johnson abandoned it completely. The offense shifted to predictable slant routes on the outside, a plan that collapsed almost instantly. When the Bears finally started to gain a little momentum, Odunze killed it with 3 consecutive drops in the second half. At that point, Chicago was still within striking distance, less than 20 points down, but those mistakes shut the door on any chance of a rally. The offense looked lifeless, the execution sloppy, and the momentum gone. Then came the quarterback storyline. Caleb Williams opened the game sharp, showing flashes of why he's supposed to be the face of this franchise. But in the second half, everything unraveled. His numbers tell the story: 19 completions on 30 attempts for 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, plus 27 rushing yards. On paper, it doesn't look terrible, but the eye test was brutal. Williams forced throws he didn't need to make, sidearmed passes without setting his feet, and relied purely on arm strength instead of mechanics. The result? Overthrows, missed opportunities, and a costly interception that flipped the momentum. By the fourth quarter, he was benched in favor of Tyson Bagent, a decision that says more about the state of this team than it does about one young quarterback. If the Bears want Caleb Williams to succeed, they need to protect him, establish a balanced offense, and teach him the simple discipline of throwing the ball away. Right now, he's playing like a rookie still trying to prove himself, and Chicago can't afford that in year 2 of a rebuild that already looks shaky. Caleb Williams' struggles weren't just about stats, they were about presence. Accuracy was off all afternoon, but what bothered me most was the body language. On the sideline, late in the game, while the Bears were trailing by nearly 30, Williams was smiling and laughing. That is not what you want from a supposed franchise quarterback. Leaders don't check out when the scoreboard looks ugly, they fight until the final whistle. This is the first time I've been truly disappointed in him. I defended Williams, praised his talent, and wanted to believe he could turn this franchise around. But yesterday, his composure and effort simply weren't there. And when you think about J.J. McCarthy battling hard for Minnesota just a week ago, refusing to quit despite adversity, the contrast is painful. Williams has the arm, the skill, the ceiling, but if he wants to be the face of this team, he has to show fire when it matters most. Now let's turn to the defense, because if you thought the offense was bad, the defense was worse. Chicago's front produced zero pressure on Jared Goff, and the veteran quarterback picked them apart with ease. His stat line: 23 of 38, 333 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, a near-perfect 159 passer rating. That's a clinic, and the Bears' defense was the helpless victim. The one time Montez Sweat finally broke through for a sack, it was wiped away by an undisciplined penalty from Tariq Stevenson. Instead of celebrating a rare moment of success, the defense walked backward, once again handing momentum to Detroit. What makes it even more unacceptable is the context. Detroit's offensive line was banged up and injured Taylor Decker on the edge, 3 interior starters from last year missing, yet Goff stood tall in a clean pocket all afternoon. No hits, no hurries, no disruption. That falls squarely on Dennis Allen. He came to Chicago with a reputation as a defensive specialist, someone who could rebuild this unit into a strength. Instead, we watched a talented young defense on paper look completely lifeless on the field. No adjustments, no intensity, and no pressure. That is coaching failure at its core. When you bring in a coach like Dennis Allen, you expect discipline, toughness, and a defensive identity. Instead, we got a collapse of historic proportions. 511 total yards allowed, 333 through the air, 177 on the ground, 0 sacks, 0 resistance. This wasn't just bad football, this might go down as one of the worst defensive performances in modern Bears history. There was no pressure on the quarterback, soft zone coverages everywhere, and even when players were in position, mistakes piled up. To make matters worse, injuries struck hard. Jalen Johnson aggravated a groin injury, and TJ Edwards, rushed back from a hamstring issue, went down again. Playing him was reckless, and it cost the defense dearly. At one point, Edwards was lined up against Jameson Williams in coverage and gave up a 65-yard bomb. Chicago was lucky the drive ended in just a field goal. When Johnson was on the field, you could see the leadership, the energy, the difference he brings. But the moment he went down, the defense lost its anchor. And now, with Dallas looming, the Bears could be facing the Cowboys without two of their most important defenders. And then there's Tariq Stevenson. His penalties were killers, wiping out momentum, gifting Detroit big gains, and burying the defense even deeper. Add in Kevin Byard's mistakes, and you have a secondary that looked completely lost. Stevenson, in particular, has to be held accountable. Talent means nothing if it's buried under careless play and missed assignments. At the end of the day, this wasn't just a loss, it was a statement. A statement that the Bears are disorganized, undisciplined, and nowhere near the standard their fans deserve. I've seen plenty of ugly Sundays in Chicago, but this one belongs near the top of the list.